Welcome, dear friends, to a fascinating story of unwavering compassion and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Enjoy the story. The hospital lobby buzzed with activity as Vincent, a young medical student with dreams of becoming a doctor, paced the gleaming floors. His eyes darted between the double doors leading to the emergency room and the nurses' station, where Olivia, the beautiful but notoriously arrogant nurse, stood filing her perfectly manicured nails. "You know, staring at her isn't going to make her notice you," a voice said from behind him. Vincent turned to see Zoe, a senior nurse with a no-nonsense attitude, giving him a knowing look. "I wasn't staring," Vincent mumbled, his cheeks flushing. "I was just observing." Zoe snorted. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England. Listen, Vincent, you're a bright kid. You've got a future ahead of you. Don't waste your time pining after someone like Olivia. Focus on your studies, on becoming the best doctor you can be." Vincent sighed, knowing she was right. But there was just something about Olivia, something that drew him in like a moth to a flame. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the double doors burst open and a flurry of activity spilled into the lobby. "Incoming!" a paramedic shouted, wheeling a gurney through the chaos. "Elderly female, unconscious, possible head trauma." Vincent sprang into action, his daydreams forgotten as he raced alongside the gurney. As he helped transfer the patient onto a bed in the ICU, he caught a glimpse of her face. She was old, her skin weathered and creased with age, but there was something familiar about her, something that tugged at the edges of his memory. "Vincent," Dr. Andrew Anderson, the attending physician, barked. "I want you to take a look at her x-rays. See if you can determine the cause of her injuries. We'll discuss your findings in the morning." Vincent nodded, his heart racing with excitement. This was his chance to prove himself, to show everyone that he had what it took to be a real doctor. As he settled in front of the glowing screens, he couldn't shake the feeling that this case was going to change everything. Vincent's eyes burned with exhaustion as he pored over the x-rays, the images blurring together into a haze of shadows and light. He had been at it for hours, studying every fracture, every contusion, trying to piece together the puzzle of what had happened to the old woman. As his eyelids grew heavy, he felt himself slipping into a restless sleep. Suddenly, he was no longer in the hospital, but back in his childhood home, cowering in the corner as his mother screamed in pain. "You worthless piece of trash!" his biological father roared, his fists slamming into his mother's frail body. "You think you can leave me? You think you can take my son away from me?" Vincent watched in horror as his stepfather burst into the room, his eyes wild with rage. "Get away from her, you monster!" he shouted, throwing himself at the attacker. The two men grappled on the floor, their bodies slamming against the walls as they fought. Vincent's mother crawled towards him, her face streaked with tears and blood. "Run, Vincent!" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "Run and don't look back!" But before he could move, his biological father broke free from his stepfather's grip and lunged towards them, his hands outstretched like claws. Vincent felt a searing pain in his head, and then everything went black. He woke with a start, his heart pounding in his chest. It had been years since he had thought about that night, years since he had allowed himself to remember the horror of what he had witnessed. But now, as he stared at the x-rays in front of him, he realized with a sickening clarity that the injuries he saw there were all too familiar. The old woman hadn't just been injured. She had been beaten. "Ah, Vincent, there you are," Dr. Anderson said as he entered the room. "What have you found?" Vincent swallowed hard, his hands shaking as he pointed to the x-rays. "These injuries, they're not from a fall or an accident. They're from an assault. Someone did this to her. Someone strong enough to break bones and cause this kind of damage." Dr. Anderson nodded grimly. "I was afraid of that. But who would do such a thing to a defenseless old woman?" Before Vincent could respond, the door swung open and Olivia sauntered in, her high heels clicking on the tiles. "I heard we have a new patient," she said, her voice dripping with boredom. "Some old lady who got beat up by her drunk husband, probably fighting over the last bottle of booze." Vincent felt his blood boil. How could she be so callous, so uncaring? He opened his mouth to retort, but Dr. Anderson beat him to it. "That's enough, Olivia," he snapped, his eyes flashing with anger. "This is a serious situation, not some gossip fodder for you to spread around. If you can't show some compassion, maybe you should consider working at a private clinic catering to the wealthy instead of a public hospital." Olivia's mouth fell open, her face flushing with embarrassment. I didn't mean—" "Save it," Dr. Anderson said, cutting her off. "Now, if you'll excuse us, Vincent and I have work to do." As Olivia slunk out of the room, Vincent felt a rush of admiration for Dr. Anderson. He had always respected the man, but now he saw him in a new light, not just as a brilliant physician, but as a true leader, someone who stood up for what was right. "So, Vincent," Dr. Anderson said, turning back to the X-rays, "what do you think we should do next?" Vincent took a deep breath, his mind racing. He thought of the old woman lying in the hospital bed, of the pain and fear she must have felt. He thought of his own mother, of the scars she bore from his father's abuse, and he knew, with a sudden clarity, what he had to do. "We find out who did this," he said, his voice steady and determined. "And we make sure they never hurt anyone again." The hospital room was quiet, the only sound the steady beep of the heart monitor. Vincent stood by the old woman's bedside, a small care package clutched in his hands. His mother had sent it, filled with homemade cookies and a soft knitted blanket, the kind of simple comforts that could mean the world to someone in pain. As he set the package down on the bedside table, the old woman's eyes fluttered open. Who are you?" she croaked, her voice hoarse and weak. "My name is Vincent," he said gently. "I'm one of the medical students here. I brought you some things from my mother to help you feel more comfortable." The woman's eyes widened, and Vincent saw a flicker of fear cross her face. You have to help me," she whispered, her hand reaching out to grab his wrist. "My son, he did this to me. He's a monster, and he'll never stop. Please, you have to tell him I died. I'll live on the streets, I'll do anything. Just don't let him find me." Vincent felt his heart clench. He had suspected as much, but to hear it confirmed, to see the terror in the old woman's eyes, it was almost too much to bear. He gently patted her hand, trying to reassure her. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now. We won't let anyone hurt you, I promise." Just then, the door swung open and Zoe burst in, her face flushed with anger. "Vincent, we have a problem. That old woman's son is here and he's causing a scene at the nurse's station. He's demanding to see her and he won't take no for an answer." Vincent felt a cold fury wash over him. He squeezed the old woman's hand one last time, then straightened up, his jaw set with determination. "Stay with her," he told Zoe. "Don't let anyone in until I get back." He strode out of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the commotion from down the hall, the sound of raised voices and slamming doors. As he rounded the corner, he saw Grace, the kind-hearted nurse from the small town, standing toe-to-toe with a hulking brute of a man. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't let you see her," Grace said firmly, her voice trembling slightly. "She's in no condition for visitors right now." "Don't give me that crap!" the man roared, his face twisted with rage. "She's my mother, and I have every right to see her. Now give me her damn pension card before I—" He raised his hand as if to strike Grace, but before he could, Vincent was there, slamming him against the wall with a strength he didn't know he possessed. "Listen to me, you piece of garbage," he growled, his face inches from the man's. "If you ever come near your mother again, if you even think about laying a finger on her, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life. Now get out of here before I call the cops and have you arrested for assault." The man's eyes widened with fear, and he struggled against Vincent's grip. But Vincent held firm, his gaze unwavering, until finally the man slumped in defeat. "Fine," he muttered, shrugging off Vincent's hands. "But this isn't over. I'll be back, and when I am, you'll be sorry." He slunk away, leaving Vincent and Grace standing alone in the hallway. Vincent turned to her, his heart still racing. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, reaching out to touch her arm. Grace nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm fine, thanks to you. That was really brave, what you did." Vincent felt a flush of warmth spread through him. He had always admired Grace, her kindness and compassion, the way she treated every patient with dignity and respect. And now, seeing the way she looked at him, the gratitude in something else, something deeper in her eyes, it made his heart skip a beat. "I was just doing what needed to be done," he said, trying to sound humble. "But thank you, Grace. That means a lot, coming from you." They stood there for a moment, lost in each other's gaze, until the sound of footsteps broke the spell. Vincent turned to see Dr. Anderson striding towards them, his face grim. "I just heard what happened," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Vincent, Grace, I need you to come with me. We have some paperwork to fill out, and then we need to call the police. This has gone on long enough." Vincent nodded, his hand finding Grace's and giving it a gentle squeeze. Together, they followed Dr. Anderson down the hall, ready to face whatever came next. The sun was shining as Vincent and his mother helped Grandma Ethel out of the car, her frail body supported between them. It had been 2 weeks since she had been discharged from the hospital, and in that time, Vincent and his mother had made all the necessary arrangements to take her in, to give her the love and care she so desperately needed. As they entered the house, Grandma Ethel's eyes widened with wonder. "It's so beautiful," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I never thought I would live in a place like this again." Vincent's mother smiled, patting her hand gently. "This is your home now, Ethel. You'll never have to worry about being alone or afraid again." Just then the doorbell rang, and Vincent's heart leaped in his chest. He knew who it was before he even opened the door, and sure enough, there stood Grace, her arms laden with bags of groceries and a shy smile on her face. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said softly, her cheeks flushing pink. "I just thought I could help out, maybe make some meals for Grandma Ethel to have throughout the week." Vincent felt a rush of affection wash over him. This was the Grace he had come to know and love, the Grace who always put others first, who had a heart big enough to embrace the whole world. "You could never intrude," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "In fact, I was hoping you might come by more often, even if you don't have a specific reason. I like having you around." Grace's smile widened, and she ducked her head bashfully. "I like being around you too, Vincent. In fact, I think I might be falling for you." Vincent's heart soared, and he reached out to take her hand, pulling her close. "I'm falling for you too, Grace. I have been for a long time." They stood there, lost in each other's eyes, until the sound of laughter from the living room broke the spell. They turned to see Grandma Ethel and Vincent's mother, their heads bent together in conversation, their faces alight with joy. "Look at them," Grace said softly, leaning her head on Vincent's shoulder. "They're so happy. You did that, Vincent. You gave them a second chance at life." Vincent felt a lump form in his throat, and he blinked back tears. "I couldn't have done it without you, Grace. You've been there for me every step of the way, always believing in me, always pushing me to be better." Grace smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to his cheek. "That's because I know who you are, Vincent. You're a good man, with a kind heart and a strong sense of justice. And I know that no matter what happens, no matter what challenges we face, we'll face them together." Vincent nodded, his heart full to bursting. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would be obstacles and setbacks and moments of doubt. But with Grace by his side, with his mother and Grandma Ethel to love and support him, he knew that he could face anything. And as he looked out the window, at the bright blue sky and the birds singing in the trees, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. This was where he belonged, with the people he loved, fighting for what was right and good in the world. And he knew, with a sudden clarity, that he would never stop fighting, never stop striving to make a difference, as long as he had breath in his body. For he was Vincent, the aspiring doctor with a heart of gold, and this was only the beginning of his story.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike. What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.